Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into the rules around service animals. Using official guidance from the Department of Justice, we're going to break down the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's the ADA, so you can get a really clear picture of the rights, the rules, and what it all means for everyone. Okay, so picture the scene, because it happens in businesses every single day. For an employee, it can be a moment of, real uncertainty. And for a person with a disability, it can be a frustrating barrier. But it really doesn't have to be. The ADA rules are actually surprisingly specific and very clear. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First up, we'll cover the official definition. Then we'll get into the exact questions you are and aren't allowed to ask. After that, we'll look at rights and responsibilities, bust some super common myths, and finally, we'll cover those rare cases where the rules are a little different. All right, let's jump right in. Because to understand any of the other rules, we have to start with the most fundamental question. What exactly is a service animal according to the law? So under the ADA, the language is super specific. You gotta notice the key phrases here. First, it specifies a dog. Second, that dog has to be individually trained. And third, it must do work or perform tasks that are directly related to the person's disability. This makes it crystal clear we're not just talking about any pet. And this, right here, is probably the single biggest point of confusion out there. A service animal is trained for a job, like guiding someone who is blind or alerting to an oncoming seizure. An emotional support animal, on the other hand, provides comfort just by being there. Now that's incredibly important for sure, but under the ADA, it doesn't grant that animal automatic access to public places.
Okay, so we know what a service animal is, but how does that actually work in the real world? Let's get to the most practical part, what a business can and can't ask when someone comes in with an animal.
Believe it or not, it's this simple. If it's not totally obvious what task the animal performs, like a guide dog is pretty obvious, then staff are legally allowed to ask only 2 questions. Just 2.
And here they are. These are the only 2. First, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? All you need is a simple yes or no. And second, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? And the handler should be able to tell you the task, like, he's trained to alert me to the presence of allergens.
Now, this is just as important. Here's what you absolutely can't do. You can't ask what the person's disability is. You can't ask for a doctor's note or any kind of medical paperwork. You can't demand to see an ID card for the dog, and you can never, ever ask the dog to demonstrate its task. This is all about protecting an individual's right to privacy. But this whole thing isn't just a one-way street about what a business has to do. The ADA creates this balance, a set of rights and responsibilities for everyone, to make sure public access works for everybody. And this chart really lays it out perfectly. On one side, a business has to allow the animal anywhere customers can go. They can't charge extra fees for the animal or stick the person in some pet-friendly corner. But on the other side, the handler has responsibilities too. They have to keep the dog under control, make sure it's housebroken, and take care of all its needs. This quote straight from the ADA guidance really nails that point home. It is the handler's job, and only the handler's job, to care for the animal. A business is never on the hook to provide food, water, or a spot for the animal to go to the bathroom.
All right, time for one of my favorite parts, myth-busting. There are so many misconceptions floating around about service animals, so let's just clear up the 3 biggest ones right now.
You see it all the time, right? Dogs with those little vests that say service animal? It's become such a common sight that a lot of people just assume it's legally required. But is it?
The answer is a big, clear no. While a lot of handlers use them to let the public know, hey, my dog is working, please don't distract it, it's completely optional. It has absolutely no bearing on their legal right to be there.
Okay, here's another huge one. You can go online right now and buy a service animal certificate from a dozen different websites. They look pretty official, but what's their actual legal power?
Again, the answer is a hard no. The Department of Justice is extremely clear on this. Those online documents mean nothing under the ADA. They are not proof of anything, and a business that demands to see one is actually breaking the law. So what about breed restrictions? Let's say a city has a ban on a certain breed, or maybe a business owner is just afraid of certain types of dogs. Can they turn away a service animal just because of its breed?
The law is super clear on this one too. The ADA's protection overrides local breed bans. A service animal can't be kicked out because of stereotypes or fear. The rules demand that a business has to assess each animal individually, based on its actual behavior, not on how it looks. So are these rules absolute? Well, not quite. There are a few very specific situations where a business can legally say no to a service animal. Let's look at those.
So, a business can ask a handler to remove their animal for two main behavioral reasons. One, if it's out of control and the handler can't get it back under control, or two, if it isn't housebroken. There's a third reason, which is if its presence would fundamentally alter the business itself. Think about a sterile operating room or maybe a sensitive lab at a zoo. But, and this is key, simple fear or allergies are not enough to exclude an animal.
And it's also really important to know that the ADA doesn't cover absolutely everywhere. For example, religious organizations are generally exempt. Federal agencies follow their own rules under a different law. And airlines? They're covered by the Air Carrier Access Act, which has its own totally separate set of regulations. And that's the breakdown. The two key questions, the shared responsibilities, and the real truth behind all those myths. You know, at the end of the day, knowing these rules isn't just about avoiding trouble. It's about building public spaces where everyone, especially people who rely on service animals, can feel welcome and respected. Thanks for joining us.